Hello, everyone. Welcome again to another episode of Experts Live India podcast. I know it's been a while. It was like, I think, couple, if not more than that, months ago that we've done the last one. But yeah, there's been some things going on in the background, so wasn't really finding the time to record another session. But here we are today, and today I'm with a very good friend of mine, Jayesh Sharma. We met was it a few months ago, or has it been a
I
year
think
ago?
probably a year, more than a year now.
A, a year ago, maybe. So we met in a conference, Easy Conf, back in 2022, Chennai, and we were both
Last year.
speakers there. I was talking about hybrid cloud, and he was talking about MLOps, I think. So that's where we met, and we met other a few other wonderful guys as well. Spent some fun time together, and that's how we became friends. So today Jayesh is here. Jayesh, you want to go and quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a lovely time in Chennai, and I think I've made a lot of good friends then. And since then, we've been meeting at many of the conferences in the future, so that's really nice. As Sameer mentioned, I primarily work in the MLOps field. So I work as a platform engineer at this startup called ZenML. It's based in Munich, and we are mostly an open source company who develop this library called ZenML, which help people or other companies to make their models in a way that they are production ready from day zero. So we help you design your code in such a way which is like tool agnostic and also infra agnostic. So you can run this anywhere and use any tools you want. That is the idea behind it. And I've been personally involved with MLOps space since my last year in college. I've been mostly working in the cloud, and then I found interest in machine learning, and then I switched over to MLOps. And since then, it's been like a really nice ride, learning new tools, finding new things to work on. And it's been exciting so far. And today I'm really happy to be here. And as a matter of fact, it's my first podcast. I've never done a podcast before, so I'm really
Okay.
happy that Sameer is the one hosting it. I'm
That's
really looking
nice.
forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, I know because one of the things that immediately, be really honest here, one of the things that immediately impressed me about Jayesh is actually quite young. It's like is it still early 20s, or
Yeah,
have you,
yes, late 20s,
or is
23.
it? Yeah, I think it's 24.
23 now. I graduated last year.
23, yeah,
Yeah.
23. So he's quite young, but he is also very passionate for what he does, and he is very, I would say, good at what he does. So that was one of the things that, and very confident and on stage. So I think fresh out of the college, you were speaking in events and presenting in webinars and taking workshops and something like that. So that was one of the things that really impressed me, meeting Jayesh for the first time. But anyway, so let's talk more about MLOps. No, I come more from operational slash IT, that kind of background. So when you say MLOps, it sounds very familiar to me. Um, I immediately in my mind I make a connection with, oh, I wonder, is it something to do with DevOps, or I wonder if it's something to do with all the other opses, like
Yeah.
DevSecOps, or what was the other op,
MLOps.
FinOps, whatever, right? So is it something in the same direction, or how do you
Yeah,
define that?
I think it's definitely in the same direction because all of those terms also relate to like optimizing or like making teams work together. Basically, the ops team and development teams this is the case for DevOps. And with MLOps, what happens is it's the same paradigm, but you are now dealing with machine learning models instead. So instead of having traditional software applications, what we have are now machine learning models. And what that does mean is that you have added some added complexity on top of DevOps. Because let's take an example. If you are worrying about, let's say, a software app in production, with DevOps, you'd have to see if, let's say, one component of DevOps is also monitoring and also making sure things are working. So in a traditional software scenario, what would happen is if you deploy it once and if you just monitor, let's say, the HTTP endpoint for health checks, if it returns positive, you can be sure that, okay, this thing is working right now. But that can't be said for ML systems because an ML system might still be up, but the model might be returning gibberish because the data there changed. So the key
Right.
component here is data. So data also comes in along with the codes that you have deployed. So you also have to monitor how data changes, if there's a drift in the data which is being observed right now. So all of those additional components come into the picture when you talk about MLOps. So of course it's based on the same ideology, but like there are a different set of tools here which are at play. a different set of challenges that come into the picture when you consider MLOps. So yeah, you're right in assuming it's somewhat similar, but there are of course more nuance to that.
Cool. So you mentioned a few things there, right? So let's talk about them one by one. So you talked about machine learning. You talked about some tools. You talked about some. So again, so when I say or when I hear ML or machine learning, I immediately think of AI. Right?
Mhm.
Is ML always associated with AI in some way, or is it like two different systems just loosely connected?
I think that's a tricky question about how people define things. In my mind, at least, AI feels like a more broader term which deals with a lot more concepts than machine learning does. Like machine learning to me feels like developing systems that can train machines to predict something. So you have like logistic regression, or there are many other different formulas that people train their models on. To me, that feels like machine learning. AI, on the other hand, might be it's like machine learning could be a component of AI, but AI has like other things like AI safety, which is into the picture, AI regulation. So I think it's a bigger term than just the technical aspect, which I feel is what machine learning mostly relates to. So I think that is
Right.
one distinction that I have in my mind. But of course, there are many ways to define things. So people might have different interpretations, but this is my idea
That's true.
at least.
That is true because whenever I hear of ML, I always hear it in conjunction with AI.
Yeah, yeah.
I always, whenever I read it, it's always AI ML. It's
Hmm.
never just ML or just AI. It's most of the time
Exactly.
it's in conjunction. But yeah, anyway,
Hmm.
that's a good way good way to put it is AI is the broader term and ML is just maybe a part of it that
Exactly.
makes AI happen. Okay.
Hmm.
So has MLOps? I've been hearing a lot about it very recently. Now that might be because since connecting with you on LinkedIn and Twitter and things like that, maybe my timeline is giving me more MLOps content. But I've been hearing about that a lot. So do you think it's something that has very recently come up, or has it been a term since long but just getting traction?
Yeah, I think MLOps, it's been there for a while. Like I think way back in 2017, 2018, like it's been there since ever since like ML systems came into the picture. This is because like there's a very specific need for people who are working with ML systems. So let's say like I was working with this startup before my current startup, and those guys wanted to deploy models into production as well. So they had a reinforcement learning model, and the common challenges that I faced as an engineer who was tasked in making sure that this model was trained on a Kubernetes cluster was that how do I transition from this notebook to a Docker image? And how do I run this Docker image on a cluster? How do I trigger automatic updates to the system? And all of those problems were still there. And every time the data scientist has to make some changes, I have to apply the same set of practices again. I have to take the new code, I have to run the process to create Docker image, then deploy it somewhere. So all of these challenges were there ever since people started building models and pushing them to production. So MLOps has been actively being used in bigger companies. Like any product you see which uses ML definitely has an MLOps pipeline in the backend. So even like ChatGPT or GPT-4, the models which we daily use, all of those also have some kind of pipelines at the backend which are working to making sure that they work. So MLOps has been there for a while. It has been gaining traction over the years, and since ML had more adoption, but I think it's reached a point where it's super critical now, because at this point, like I feel there are a lot of companies who use MLOps in one way or the other, and although it may feel like it is reaching a point where it might lose relevance because people may not be training the models anymore, so people just feel that they can just use the APIs. We can come to that as well, but I
Yeah.
feel MLOps still is relevant. Like that idea of managing your models, designing pipelines, making all of this automated, and then having observability on top of that. I think there's still a very important need when it comes to models.
Okay. So you said something interesting about training your models. Now,
Hmm.
to somebody who's been working maybe in the field, that makes a lot of sense. But to somebody who is not very familiar with the whole ML or machine learning, ML ops, all those terms,
Hmm.
what do you when you say training the model? What do you mean? Like, what is the model? What am I training? Why do I need to train a model?
Okay, so a machine learning model to me is you can think of it like I think many people are familiar with the idea of what model is. it would just be like a set of model, essentially just a different matrices put together. You train it by the word I train, I mean that we try to feed some data into this model so that it can predict the right output when you want it to.
So
That is the
model
idea.
is a framework. Do you mean like a
Yeah,
like a
it's a set of
system?
exactly. It's a set of different matrices. So you pass in some input, and they go through this huge amount of matrices, and they produce an output somewhat. And the weights, like the by weights, I mean what are the parameters that you set to these matrices? Like how are they multiplied by? What factor are they multiplied by? And then what result they produce in the end? That is the idea of a matrix, right? So that is the idea. So in that scenario, it's just many mathematical matrices put together and which just return an output. That is the idea. And by training a model, we mean we are tweaking and setting the right weights or the right parameters for these matrices to produce the desired result when a given input comes in. That is what training a model means essentially. And like
Okay.
in layman terms, it just means that I am teaching this model to produce the kind of output I want based on some examples I give it. That is the like high
Yeah.
level idea of that.
Okay. So is it the same as LLMs, what's the full
Yeah,
form?
large
Large
language
language
models.
models? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those are just really huge models. So the matrices that I was talking about here, like
Hmm.
just imagine them to be of like tremendous size, like billions of parameters. Like you have to tweak not just a few thousand or few hundred parameters here, but you have to tweak a billion parameters. Like let's say 175 billion or any higher number than that. So what happens here is you need large amounts of data to be able to then tweak these many parameters so that it is fine tuned in the way I want it to. So those models are trained using immense infra or immense compute that only large companies can afford. And then they train these models using these different huge amounts of data, which is available on the internet, like from GitHub, from Stack Overflow, from many other public sites. And then they train this model based on this many data, and then that is the end result we get. So those are called large language models because they are really huge and they are trained on like huge amounts of data. And like training LLMs is not everybody's job because you don't really have that much compute. It will take a lot of time and a lot of
Yeah.
like I think it might have. I think I have some read somewhere that OpenAI has this 1 billion supercomputer that Microsoft funded. So it's not something that every startup or any person can afford. But usually
Yeah.
that's same idea but on a very huge scale.
Yeah. Okay. So could you give us some real world examples for the technologies or softwares or tools or whatever that are using LLMs in the background?
I think right now a lot of the uses that I've seen pertain to chatbots specifically. So a lot
Yeah.
of companies, like even us included, like ZenML also has its own Slack bot. So if you go to our Slack, if you ask the Slack bot any questions about ZenML, it just answers to you based on our documentation, our website. So that is like one of the major use cases I've seen so far. There are of course products by that name. There's Bing Chat, which works on that, ChatGPT that works on it. So the idea is that LLMs are responsible for understanding human language, converting that to some kind of an API in the backend, and then also reading the output from that API and then making sure that it's considered in a very
Converting it
sensitive
back.
way. Exactly. So that is the only job of LLM. It doesn't really have capabilities of itself in so much, but what is the primary function that I've been seeing is that it derives knowledge from somewhere and then packages it in a way which is readable to the human. So it just enables really fluid communications between humans and the machines. That is what enables it, and that's why it's unlimited in the scope in which it can be applied. It can be on a website. You can just go to let's say a website that sells. Like I just saw this recent video by one of the founders of Metaflow that if you go and look at a sofa and if you tell them, okay, I want this in this color, you can just communicate with the website in natural language, and that happens to also communicate this to the API in the backend. So those are the frontiers where I see the most uses of LLMs in the future or even the current scenario.
Yeah, but this is not something that has birthed from chat gpt, is it? I mean, chat gpt is just maybe a very recent most popular example of it, but apart from generative ai, what would be some other use cases?
Apart from generative AI, I think are you looking for like most of the time like generative AI in its sense is inherently generating stuff out of thin air. So that's what generative AI is. So if you look at LLMs, like they are by definition generative AI. So you can't really think of solutions that are not based on the idea of producing some stuff. So when I think of LLMs, I think of use cases where I need stuff to be generated, like for example, answers or summaries of different PDFs. So like PDF summary is also a really great example. So there's also many startups in that front, like Chat PDF
Yeah.
or other
Yes.
startups which also deal with that. So in many companies, like they also adapted this idea to have smaller AIs, or like AIs which are fine tuned on some specific use cases. So there's this AI called Harvey, and that deals exclusively with legal problems. So it is trained on huge
Yes.
amounts of legal data, and
Yeah.
companies internally use that to then answer questions based on that. Even like Facebook has internal AIs which like explain the code locally to different engineers. So you can imagine a scenario where a new engineer joins in and you don't have to onboard them. You can just make them
Yeah.
ask the AI for like where should I find the file for this feature, or
Yeah.
how to implement this feature, and that AI
Mm.
already knows everything about that code context and then answers questions based on that. So all of
So
those are
where,
also great use cases.
yeah. So where does that data come from? So is that like a model that you deploy on prem in one of your servers within your data center, and you feed it data and then train the model like you say, and then the model gives you answers.
Exactly. Yes. So there are two different ways. So I think it's crucial to understand the two different scenarios here. The one is fine tuning, and the other is something I don't know what the real name is. I can just call it context, like providing
Hmm.
context. So let's say if you are an organization big enough to be able to fine tune, or if you have the capacity to fine tune, it just costs some money to do it. Like you can either choose a base model which is from OpenAI, or you can also develop your own model. But let's say I take the base OpenAI model, like GPT-4 or whatever, and then I have my own set of data, like my company data internally. So what I can do is I can provide my data to this deployment. I can deploy it on Azure, like because that will be more secure and the data won't be passed on to OpenAI. So I can have my own Azure deployment of GPT-4. I can bring in my company data, like all of my code, my internal documents, and then I can fine tune this model based on this data. So now this my deployment, which I've done on Azure, is now capable of answering all questions from my data. That is one way. And by fine tuning, I just mean that I am running the training process again. I'm fine tuning the parameters again based on this data. So that's a more expensive, more time taking process. The
Yeah.
alternative to this is like what we do with ZenML. Is like smaller companies, what they can do is instead of fine tuning this, what you can do is you can also provide some context to the model. So, for example, when I ask any GPT-4, any chat GPT, any question about some topic, it might not be able to answer it. But if I provide a context to it, like let's say I'll ask like, what is Sameer's favorite breakfast? Right, and then I provide a context next to it. Like within the same prompt, I just add a context and then provide details about you. Like Sameer is this, Sameer likes doing that. Then the model can read from the context, pick up what your favorite breakfast is, and answer you the question. Right. That is the idea. So
Right.
you can either provide a context, which is like simpler to do because you can just extract the relevant parts from the question, construct the right context, and then pass it to the model. And then the model can answer it. Or you can even fine tune this based on you, like Sameer GPT. So you can have all data fed into this model about yourself, and then it can answer without the context even. So those are two different
Right.
paradigms that people usually decide between. So either fine tuning or providing context. That is the idea.
Okay. Yeah, that was the next question I was going to ask is, so when you can pretty much ask anything to AI or
Mhm.
to the model, let's say,
Yeah.
um, do you have to like predict some questions, and then let's take an example of what Samir likes for breakfast, right?
Mhm.
And then do you tell the AI model to reply, if this question is asked, reply Samir likes vada pav, Samir likes idli sambar, Samir likes. So is there like a, do you have to provide sample answers? Like in what sense would you like to answer that question?
In some cases, you provide we don't provide answers for specific questions, but we can give them examples. Let's say if I want my AI to answer in a specific way, let's say if I want them in many use cases, like right now, agents are the talk of the town. So people are building these agents, which are just LLMs who can perform tasks. So what
Yeah.
I want from this agent would be that they output in a very specific certain way. So they output a JSON which says what action to perform and what parameters to pass to the function, let's say. So in that scenarios, I can tell the agent, okay, whenever somebody asks you a question, only reply in this specific format. Then I'll give them a few examples, right? But I won't tell them specifically that if Sameer asks something for breakfast, you should reply that, because that just defeats the purpose, right? You can't really
Right.
hard code functions, but you can still do that. Of course, you can whatever prompt you want, you can put to the model. So I can just hard code and tell it like, no matter what happens, if Sameer asks what he likes for breakfast, you should only answer this, and the model will do
Yeah.
its best to answer that. But usually
Right.
we do that by few short examples. We call them few short examples. If we want the answer to be in a specific format, we just give them a few examples. Okay, like maybe output only in this tone, maybe only do passive voice, maybe only do in Hindi or stuff like that. So that is something you can control the behavior of mods, and that's super crucial for developing downstream applications, because if some API which depends on this output, if the output is not in that specific format, the API won't be able to function. It won't be able to parse that output, right? So that is a really crucial part of this entire thing. So you're right.
Yeah. So in a way, you can just like nudge it to,
Yes.
give some direction to just answer that question.
Yeah, just
Um,
super. Yes.
yeah, and I was going to say, within even with ChatGPT or Bing or whatever, you can actually assign it a role. It's like,
Hmm.
as
Yes,
a legal advisor, give me,
exactly.
analyze this question, or as a teacher from medieval times,
Exactly.
answer
I
this
think
question. Right?
that really sparked the idea in me. Like I think I saw this on the State of GPT address on Microsoft Build, I think this year. So the idea was this: like if you don't tell the model what this model should be, then how does the model know it has to be correct? Right? That is the idea. So if I ask some question
Yeah.
about the model, it really helps if I tell them, "Ki, you are an expert on DevOps. Answer this question now." So then the model at least knows, okay, this has to be the right answer, or it has to be confident in that. So I heard that somewhere, and it's really like echoes with that. So
Does it change? I mean, based on what role you give?
of course it changes. Like there are many studies who also like tell that. So if you, let's say for example, if you're asking something to chat GPT, and if you say let's go step by step, or let's solve this
Hmm.
like you're an expert, then the answer definitely changes, because then it
Yeah.
tries to actually assume the idea that okay, this is an expert in itself, and then it answers in that way. So those are smaller hacks that you can employ when asking questions on chat GPT that will get you better answers. Like there are many different answers. I think let's go step by step is the most popular one, but there are others as well. There's also this thing which is called take a deep breath and then answer. So all of these are just phrases that people add to the prompts, which make the model answer better. This is
Yeah.
just simple hacks.
That's the art of prompt engineering. I guess is the whole buzz around prompt engineering, and how prompt engineering is the next big job title.
Yeah, I
I'm
think.
one of those. I'm one of those who promote that idea. Is if you really want to, be AI proof, so to say, because
Mhm.
everybody seems to be very scared of AI, me included. Not gonna lie. So it's just good to know about prompt engineering. It's good to know about how AIs work, and how to not get replaced by AI, basically,
Yeah,
right?
that is true. Like I think people might not be outright replaced by it, but people who don't use AI will be replaced by people who use AI. That's the idea I have. So if you're
Yeah,
not using this productivity hack which is on your table and somebody else is doing that, then they'll achieve far more than you can at the same time. And then you'll be
yeah,
replaced eventually by that person. But AI by itself obviously can't do it because you need to prompt it in many ways. So
right.
that is the idea I have at least of this thing.
Cool, awesome. So Jayesh, I'm sure if we keep talking about AIs and the dangers of AI and all the debates about AI, that's gonna be a very long conversation. So
Yeah.
we are already 22 minutes past 22 minutes at this point. So towards the end, what advice would you like to give to maybe students who want to get into AI or MLOps, or even some professional who may or may not have any experience with AIs and MLOps and stuff like that? How would you advise them to transition?
I think, to be honest, like I don't have a lot of experience with machine learning practices, definitely, because I was more in the ops side. But if there, to me, in my mind, there are two different paths that people can take. There is a path for machine learning research, which pertains to how the models are built themselves, like what parameters are set, what hyperparameters are tuned, all of those things. And then there's this part where is the application of machine learning. So like the part which I'm mostly involved in. So like how do I utilize this model API? Like how do I deploy this model? Will the model scale when I deploy it somewhere? Like how to utilize what prompts to give it to? Like what are the different downstream applications I can build based on this application of models? So all of those are two different scenarios. So if people are interested in the research aspects of it, if they are looking to develop models themselves, then I would recommend, of course, to like jump into the research side of things to maybe learn more about how models are built. Start from the first ideas of what transformers are, how those work. But if you're just looking for like implementation side, if you're looking for how to build applications out of this, I think that's a different field altogether. And I would encourage people to check out different libraries that are now relevant. I think LangChain is one of the most popular one, but I would personally encourage
What's
people to
what's the name? Sorry,
LangChain.
LangChain. Okay.
Yes, but I would personally encourage people to not just rely on that library, but use the APIs directly to see if they can build something of themselves. Because I would also personally like to see many different tools come out of India, like people who are working in India right now, who are students. They have a lot of immense potential at this point because we are at a turning point in this entire industry where
Yeah.
everything right now will still be defined. There is no one single path to achieve something, right? For example, you have React, you have Vercel, so all of those are established technologies. But right now in this scenario, there's no established technology yet. So I would encourage people to be able to experiment with these things, see if they can develop some tooling around it, which will make lives easier. See if they can develop some apps around it, and maybe that is something I also personally encourage everybody. And any meetup I go to, I try to encourage or push people to explore things in that area, because you can imagine that every let's say every field right now is open to disruption. So it could
Yeah.
be, let's say, taxation. It could be health. Healthcare is a huge area in which AI is being massively used. So even in retail, even in online commerce, all of these places, I think it's very ripe for disruption. And all you have to do is you should step back and realize, where can I utilize these technologies in what field? And I think that will reap the most benefits in the future. So yeah, I'm really excited about that scenario.
Awesome, awesome. Good to know. I'm sure you're again, like I said, you're quite young and you're very enthusiastic, hungry to learn. I'm sure there may be the next great AI tool will come from you. You never know.
You know.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you, Jayesh. Thanks a lot for your time, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you really enjoyed it. I will put post Jayesh all social handles, and if you do, you run any communities or any podcast yourself or
No,
something?
I don't write. I don't like. I just write some articles. I have a YouTube channel, but
Yeah.
I don't write podcasts yet.
Okay, well, you have a YouTube channel, so I'm sure you've got lots of great content on there. So, yeah, I will put all Jayesh's contact and handles, social media handles. So if you want to connect with him, if you have any questions, maybe if you need inspiration, maybe you can go and talk to Jayesh.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me, Sameer.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks. It was great talking to you, Jayesh. Have a nice day.
You
Bye
too.
bye.
Bye bye.